Why is Princess Leonor staying silent? The royal rule behind her carefully chosen words. Why does Princess Leonor sometimes say so little? Why are her public statements often carefully prepared? Why doesn't she simply speak her mind on every controversial subject? And why does it sometimes feel as though every word coming from the future Queen of Spain has been measured before it ever reaches the public? Is someone telling her what she can say? Is there a hidden royal rule forcing her to remain silent? Or is there something much more complicated happening behind the scenes? The answer may surprise you, because there is no confirmed evidence that Princess Leonor has been placed under a blanket silence ban, but there is a very real reason why a future Queen of Spain cannot speak publicly in the same way an ordinary young woman can, and that reason is constitutional responsibility. Leonor isn't just a princess. She is the heir to the Spanish crown, and as she moves closer to the day when she could become queen, her words can carry consequences far beyond her personal opinions. A casual comment could become an international headline. A political opinion could be interpreted as a royal position. A joke could be misunderstood. And one sentence could potentially create questions about the neutrality expected from the crown. So today, we're going behind the carefully chosen words of Princess Leonor. Why does she speak the way she does? What can she say? What should she avoid? And could her silence actually be one of the most important forms of preparation for becoming queen? Chapter 1: The silence that people notice. Princess Leonor lives in an unusual world. She is young enough to be expected to have personal opinions, but important enough that her opinions can become news. That creates a contradiction. Most young people can post something online, give an opinion, make a joke, comment on politics, change their minds later, and move on. For Leonor, it isn't that simple. Imagine she makes a casual political comment. The next morning, newspapers could be discussing it. Political commentators could analyze it. International media could translate it. Social media users could debate whether she was expressing the future position of the Spanish crown. That is enormous pressure. And it explains why silence can sometimes be safer than speaking. Chapter 2: There is no simple silence ban. Let's clear up one important misconception. There is no established evidence that Princess Leonor has been subjected to a secret rule saying she is forbidden from speaking for herself. That would be an oversimplification. What exists instead is a combination of constitutional expectations, royal protocol, preparation, and institutional caution. Spain is a constitutional monarchy. King Felipe VI has a defined constitutional role. The monarchy is expected to remain above day-to-day party politics, and Leonor, as heir, is being prepared for that same constitutional environment. That means her public statements are likely to be carefully considered, not necessarily because she has no opinions, but because expressing every opinion publicly could create confusion about whether she is speaking personally or symbolically as the future monarch. That distinction is crucial. Chapter 3: The power of a royal voice. Think about what happens when an ordinary person makes a political statement. Perhaps 10 people hear it, maybe 100, maybe 1,000. But when Princess Leonor speaks, millions of people may listen. Her words have symbolic weight. That is the power of a royal voice. Even if she says, "I personally think," some people may immediately ask, does this represent the future position of the Spanish crown? That is why constitutional monarchs and heirs have to be extremely careful. The problem isn't necessarily what they believe. The problem is how their words could be interpreted. And sometimes, saying less protects the institution. Chapter 4: The difference between personal and official speech. This is one of the most important distinctions. Princess Leonor has a personal identity. She is a daughter, a student, a young woman, a member of a family. But she also has an official identity. She is the Princess of Asturias. She is first in line to the Spanish throne. When she speaks at an official event, people don't necessarily hear only Leonor. They hear the future queen. That creates a complicated communication problem. Imagine Leonor attends an event celebrating education. She talks about the importance of learning. That is relatively straightforward. But imagine she begins discussing a controversial political dispute. Suddenly, the interpretation changes. People may wonder whether she is expressing a personal opinion or signaling the future position of the crown. That is why royal communication is carefully managed. Chapter 5: Why political neutrality matters. Constitutional monarchies rely heavily on political neutrality. The monarchy is expected to stand above party politics. The king is not supposed to function like a political party leader. The crown represents the state and constitutional continuity. That makes neutrality incredibly valuable. And Leonor is being prepared for a future in which she will inherit that responsibility. So if she openly supported one political party today, what would happen? People could question her impartiality. Her future constitutional role could become politically complicated, and opponents could use her statement as evidence that the monarchy favors one side. That is precisely the kind of situation royal institutions try to avoid. So sometimes, silence isn't weakness. It is discipline. Chapter 6: What Leonor can talk about. Careful communication doesn't mean Leonor has nothing to say. Quite the opposite. Her speeches can focus on subjects appropriate to her role: education, culture, science, service, national institutions, young people, the military, international cooperation. Spain's history and future. These subjects allow her to develop a public voice without turning herself into a partisan political figure, and that may be exactly what she is being taught. The goal isn't to make Leonor invisible. The goal is to help her become a credible future monarch. She needs a voice, but that voice needs discipline. Chapter 7 The Military Connection. Leonor's military education makes this issue even more interesting. As heir to the crown, she is receiving military training across Spain's armed forces. That isn't just ceremonial preparation. It introduces her to institutions with enormous constitutional importance. When she speaks at military events, her words can carry particular significance. She needs to understand discipline, hierarchy, service, responsibility, and leadership. But she also needs to understand the distinction between political debate and institutional duty. That is another reason careful communication matters. Chapter 8 What about social media? Now imagine if Leonor had a completely ordinary social media account. She posts a photograph. Someone comments. She responds. Another person asks her opinion. She answers casually. Then someone screenshots the conversation. The screenshot spreads. Within hours, newspapers are discussing it. That is the nightmare scenario. This is one reason members of royal families often have highly controlled public communication. The internet does not forget. A sentence written in seconds can remain online for decades. For a future queen, that can be dangerous, because her words may eventually be judged in a completely different political or social environment. Something that seems harmless today could be controversial tomorrow. Chapter 9 Why Queen Letizia understands this. Queen Letizia's background makes her particularly aware of the power of words. Before joining the royal family, she worked as a journalist. She understood the media. She understood headlines. She understood how information could be interpreted, and she eventually experienced the other side of the equation. Instead of reporting on public figures, she became one. For Leonor, having a mother who understands both journalism and royal life could be valuable. She can learn that public communication isn't simply about saying something interesting. It is about understanding what happens after you say it. Chapter 10 King Felipe's example. King Felipe has also spent years mastering careful communication. His speeches are usually formal. His public statements are deliberate. And when political controversy arises, the crown has to be extremely careful about its position. Leonor can observe that. She can see what her father says, what he doesn't say, when he speaks, when he remains silent, and how he communicates during difficult moments. That is part of her education. A future monarch doesn't just learn how to speak. She learns when not to speak. Chapter 11 Silence can be a form of power. This is where the story gets interesting. We often think of power as having the ability to speak, but for a monarch, power can also involve restraint. Imagine everyone is demanding an opinion. The media wants an answer. Social media is exploding. Political parties are arguing, and the future queen says nothing. That silence may frustrate people, but it can also protect neutrality. Sometimes refusing to comment prevents a controversy from becoming larger. Sometimes silence allows other institutions to handle political disputes. And sometimes the most responsible thing a future monarch can say is simply nothing. Chapter 12 But too much silence can create another problem. There is, however, another side. If Leonor says too little, people may begin to wonder, what does she actually believe? Does she have her own personality? Is she being controlled? Is the royal institution hiding her? These questions can create suspicion. A future monarch therefore has to find a balance. Too much freedom could create controversy. Too much control could make her appear distant or artificial. The challenge is to develop an authentic voice without turning that voice into partisan political activism. That is much harder than it sounds. Chapter 13 The future queen needs her own voice. Eventually, Leonor will become queen, and when that happens, she cannot simply repeat everything her father said. She will need her own style, her own communication, her own relationship with the Spanish public. That development has already begun. Every speech gives people a glimpse of her personality. Every public appearance shows how she handles pressure. Every official event allows her to become more comfortable in her role. So perhaps the careful wording we see today isn't about permanently silencing Leonor. It may be about giving her time to develop. The institution is allowing her to grow before asking her to carry the full weight of the crown. Chapter 14 The day her words will matter even more. One day, Leonor may become queen. At that point, the consequences of her public words will become even greater. She will address the nation, represent Spain internationally, speak during national moments of celebration, potentially address moments of crisis, and perhaps give speeches that define the tone of her reign. The preparation for those moments begins now. Every carefully written speech, every formal ceremony, every public appearance, every decision about what to say and what not to say, it's all part of the training. Chapter 15 Is Leonor really silent? So, is Princess Leonor really being silenced? Not in the dramatic sense that some headlines might suggest. There is no confirmed evidence of a secret ban preventing her from speaking for herself. But there is something real. Expectation. She is expected to understand the weight of her position. She is expected to avoid turning the crown into a partisan political actor. She is expected to represent the institution with dignity, and she is expected to develop the judgment necessary to know when her voice is needed, and when silence is wiser. That may be one of the hardest lessons of becoming queen, because ordinary people can speak first and explain later. A future monarch often has to think first, then speak. The voice behind the crown. Perhaps the real story isn't that Princess Leonor has lost her voice. Perhaps she is learning how to use it. There is a difference. She is growing up in a world where every sentence can become a headline, every expression can become a photograph, every opinion can become a political controversy. And yet, eventually, she will have to stand before the Spanish people and speak as their queen. So the challenge isn't to remain silent forever. It is to develop a voice powerful enough to be heard, and disciplined enough to know when to remain quiet. That is the paradox of royal communication. The future queen needs a voice, but she also needs restraint. She needs authenticity, but she also needs neutrality. She needs personality, but she must also represent an institution larger than herself. And perhaps that is what we're really watching when Princess Leonor speaks carefully at official events. We're not watching a princess who has nothing to say. We're watching a future monarch learning that, when your words carry the weight of a crown, every word matters. One day, she will no longer be the young heir learning beside her parents. She will stand alone. The cameras will turn toward her. Millions will listen. And when she finally speaks, people won't just be listening to Leonor. They'll be listening to the queen. Music rises, so what do you think? Should Princess Leonor have more freedom to express her personal opinions publicly, or is careful royal communication necessary for the future Queen of Spain? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to follow Leonor's journey from Princess of Asturias to future queen, subscribe. Because the most powerful thing about her voice may not be what she says today, but what she will eventually choose to say when the crown is hers.